Amen. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Pastor Joel, worship pastor here. Of course, a lot of you know me because I usually lead worship in here. But thank you for Jeff and the team. Jeff and I love each other. He just doesn't realize it yet. Just kidding. We love each other.
Like that, huh?
The last thing we say, we always, on Monday, I don't know why I'm saying this. On Monday, we get together and we talk and we go around the circle and we say, is there anything that we need from Jeff? And I just look at him like this and say, just his love and affection. Every week. What's that? And food, yeah, that's Speaking of food, so last week, Pastor Phil stood up here in front of you and took a bite of a donut, and it looked so delicious. And then a few weeks ago, Pastor Scott stood up here and he had this big loaf of bread, and he just took this big bite out of it. And if any of you know me intimately or even just from afar even, you will know that I love food. It's one of my favorite things, and it's a recreational sport for me. And so I was trying to think of how I could incorporate food into the sermon, and I just couldn't come up with it. So I was going to just go get something random and just eat it just because I could. And I was telling the story to somebody, and they said, you should go get honey walnut shrimp and just eat it. And I said, no, because that's disgusting. But, oh, this is getting videotaped. Dang it. But so I just bailed on it, and then God bless Pastor Phil. He comes up to me. Oh, hey, thanks, Louie. See, that's how you know you are known and you are loved. Louie knows me and loves me. So now I have, the girls aren't here, so I can hide them and I can eat them myself. But so now I've got Pop'ems from Louie, but Pastor Phil also came and he brought me a donut this morning. Isn't that nice? It's delicious. And I think it might have been out of the kindness of his heart or to say there was more donuts out there for sale, but I'll think it's from the kindness of his heart. But so thank you, Pastor Phil. Okay, now it's down. Today's also a special day for me in another way. Today, my oldest daughter turned 9. Today is her 9th birthday. And I know what you're all thinking. You're looking up there and saying, no, that guy does not look old enough to have a 9-year-old. I know, but I do. She's 9. When I think back at her life, she's like the only kid whose birthday I remember. Not really, but on a consistent basis. Like, when are your kids' birthdays? Karis is March 22nd. And then beyond that, I love them all, though. Don't judge me. But whenever these things happen, it always makes me think about life. It makes me just reflect on life. And I want to ask, have you taken the time just to do that, just to stop and reflect on life? What has God done in your life in the past? Where is he taking you in the future? We all have questions about life. And birthdays and different moments, it makes me stop and think what God wants from my life, what his plan is. And whenever you think about life, it inevitably leads to death. A wise man once told me that as far as he knew, that the human death rate still hovered around 100%. We're all going to die one day. There was only one person who came to this earth who said, I've come to give life, and I've come to give life in full. I've come to give life, and I've come to give life eternal. And that is Jesus Christ. And for the past 6 weeks, we've been going through the Gospel of John, watching John reveal to us in these succession or series of signs or miracles just exactly who Jesus is. Step by step, he's been revealing to us what Jesus came for and who he is, what he has power over. And then today we're going to be looking at sign 7, but before we get to sign 7, which I heard Scott in the announcements already gave it away, so yes, Lazarus raises from the dead, but still let me get there. But let's quickly go through the past 6 signs to bring us kind of once more along this journey that John's been bringing, showing how Jesus brought the disciples, and now he's bringing us. So the first miracle we had was water into wine. In John chapter 2, verse 11, it says this. It said, what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So here was the first step of belief. He changes the water into wine. It doesn't seem as miraculous as the opening miracle in some of the other Gospels, healing a man from leprosy, casting out demons, but here it is. Jesus wants to show that the empty ways of religion without a relationship are empty, but he's come to give joy, to give him a fullness of life, and that life with him is full, it's rich, it's joyful. Miracle number 2, we have the healing of the official son, where a man hears of Jesus' power. His son is lying sick, he's dying, and from 20 miles away, Jesus heals him. The man goes back, finds his son healed, and it said in the scriptures that John says that he and his whole family believed. Miracle number 3, we have the healing at the pool of Bethsaida. A man unable to move himself, he's physically unable to even walk or stand. And we see that just like that man needed help from an outside source physically, we too need help from an outside source spiritually. And Jesus, who has control over the physical, certainly can have control over the spiritual. Miracle number 4, the feeding of the 5,000. A large crowd has come and they've heard about these miracles with Jesus and they're following him. But there's no food, so Andrew finds a boy with 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fish, and Jesus takes it and feeds the masses, and even more so, there's more food left over than when he began with. Jesus says, I can take care of all of your needs, and saying it's not just about bread, but it's about the fullness of your life. Step by step, coming into this belief, this deeper belief of who Jesus is and what he can do. And we see miracle number 5, walking on water. He sends the disciples across the Sea of Galilee. The storm comes. They can't go any further. And they see Jesus having complete control over nature, walking on water. And there again, the disciples have an even deeper belief. They bow down and worship him. They say, you must be something great. Step by step by step. Last week, Pastor Phil talked to us about the restoring the sight to the man who had been born blind. He makes some mud, covers his eyes, sends him to go wash. And perhaps one of my favorite quotes, not by Jesus, in the Bible, is when that man says, whether he's a sinner or not, I have no idea. All I know is I was blind, and now I see. And it says that that man came back, and he bowed down and worshiped God and believed in him. Step by step, further and further into belief that Jesus is who he says he is. He has control over nature, control over our physical disease, control over blindness, control over everything. Now in our life groups, it was kind of funny. I don't know if, I won't name them, I won't call them out, but in our life group, somebody mentioned, I just thought it was kind of a funny thing on Monday. We were talking about last week's sermon. And he said, at the beginning, the signs were kind of interesting. They were a little mysterious. Why did Jesus do this? But as we've progressed along, it's kind of obvious. Jesus is exactly who he says he is. There's not anything we have to think about. It's pretty clear. And as we go into sign number 7, it's going to take even one more step further in just a complete obviousness that Jesus is exactly who he says he is. As we're going to see that he has control and authority over death itself. So if you want to open with me to John chapter 11, Gospel of John chapter 11. That's where we find the raising of Lazarus. Let's take a quick look at the who. There's going to be 3 main people that we're going to meet besides Jesus. And we see in 11, verse 1, it says, right away, there was a man named Lazarus, and he was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. So we have this group of siblings, the 3 of them, a brother and 2 sisters. Now he goes on, and he says, kind of goes further into Mary. He said, this Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. Now I want to make just a quick note on this, because if you read from John chapter 11 and keep going in the Gospel of John, you get to John chapter 12, which is where this story is, of Mary wiping Jesus' feet. So chronologically, this hasn't happened yet. And in the Gospel of John, this story hasn't happened yet John chooses to refer to Mary being that exact Mary. And what we can assume by that is that John's Gospel wasn't the only written or even told story about Jesus Christ. There were other stories. The other Gospels were around and people told stories, so they knew this Mary. They knew that story. It's a very intimate story that I'm sure they would have heard. It would have been in their memory. But he wants to tell us this because this is the first time that we hear about Lazarus. This is the first time we hear this name, so he wants to introduce the readers who perhaps didn't know the brother to tell them that Lazarus was one with Mary and Martha, and that he was one who was in this very deep, intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. And we know this because in verse 3, it says that these sisters, Mary and Martha, sent word to Jesus and says, "Lord, the one you love is sick." So we know that there was this deep relationship between Lazarus and Jesus. It was someone that he loved, someone that he had a relationship with. So you would think that if Jesus had this deep relationship with Lazarus and heard he was sick, and you would have to assume that he's probably pretty sick if Mary and Martha would take the time to actually send somebody to Jesus. Jesus at this time was up in a region called Perea, 20 miles to the north, as far away from Jerusalem as possible. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But he sends word, so you would think that Jesus, loving him so much, would immediately just take off. That he would go, that he would want to be there to do something for his close friend. But that's where we get to point number 1. That Jesus doesn't always do what you think he should do. Jesus doesn't always do what you think he should do. So after he hears this news, he tells the disciples in verse 4 that the sickness is not going to end in death, but it's going to be for God's glory, so that the God's Son may be glorified through it. He doesn't state how this will be true. He doesn't tell them his plan. He just says, at the end of all this, I just want you to know this is going to be for my glory. Have you had moments like that where you're kind of questioning, what's God's plan? What's your method? What are you doing? Who am I going to marry? Am I going to get that job? Is this sickness ever going to end? Is this pain going to go away? Do you have those questions? No, just me? You have these questions, right? Not only I have these questions, and not only do I have questions, but I have answers. I'll tell God exactly what I want to do. Here's my plan for how I'm going to get better. I'm going to get better now. That's my plan, God. God, I want to pray for healing, and when do I want to be healed? I want to be healed now. That's my plan. Did you ever get like that? And God doesn't always fill in the story for us. He doesn't always tell us how things are going to go. There's just one thing he makes known for certain. It'll be for my glory. It'll be for my glory. I'm sure many of you who've come through a situation where it's been painful, but you've seen God bring you out of it. You've seen that. You've known that. But when you're in the midst of it, it's hard. It's hard to see. It's hard to know. And right now, Mary and Martha are in the midst of the pain. And in verse 5, John goes further to say Jesus loved Martha. He loved her sister Mary. He loved Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed there for 2 more days. Why? God, that's not my plan. Why would you stay for 2 more days? Now, we could give a human, fleshly reason for it. Because like I said, Jesus was 20 miles away from Jerusalem. And where Lazarus was laying sick in Bethany was just less than 2 miles. We find out later in the passage, less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. And right now, for Jesus to go to Jerusalem would not be a smart idea. They want him dead. They've already tried to stone him multiple times. So you can understand, from our fleshly standpoint, you can understand what the disciples were thinking. Yeah, we probably don't want to go to Jerusalem. Lazarus may be sick, but hopefully he'll get better. We're not going there because we're going to die if we go there. But there we see again that Jesus' plan, he doesn't do things the way we think we should do them, because the very next verse, he says, let's go back to Judea. He has no concern for his life and safety. And the disciples say to him, but Rabbi, a short while ago they tried to stone you, yet you want to go back there? Then Jesus gives this interesting statement in verse 9 and 10. But are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by this world's light. It is when he walks by night that he stumbles, for he has no light. And the light that Jesus is referring to is the very light that John introduced to us in John chapter 1, when he said the true light was coming into this world. And that true light was Jesus Christ himself. The true light was Jesus. And what Jesus is trying to tell his disciples, that while I'm here, the true light is here. And while the true light is here, my purpose is to do the will of the Father. And nothing can stop me from doing that. There is no fear of death. There's no fear of condemnation. There is no fear of ridicule. All there is I need to do the will of my Father. That's what he was called to do. And the night refers to the time when we try to rely on our own self-understanding. So he, Jesus Christ, being from the Father, being God in flesh, being the light of the world, didn't come to earth to live a safe life. In fact, he didn't even come to stay alive at all, which is a plan that the disciples didn't see. None of us could comprehend why he would do this. But he came to do the work of his Father, and the work of his Father will only be finished on the cross, not hiding 20 miles away from the leadership in Jerusalem. So Jesus says, we walk in light and we go, for I have a purpose. So he explains it to them even more deeply. In verse 11, he says, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. We're going to go wake him up. His disciples, again, they don't get it. Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. And he tells him plainly, Lazarus, he's dead. But for your sake, I'm glad I was not there so that you may believe. That you may believe. So now let us go to him. The disciples, Jesus is taking them step by step, trying to get them to understand, trying to get them close. But they don't know. How do they even know that Lazarus is dead? How does Jesus know? All they've heard is he's sick. He's 20 miles away. They have no sense of understanding whatsoever. But after talking with Jesus, having this conversation, Thomas, he turns and he says to the disciples, it says in verse 16, he says to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. Now I want to make it very clear that when Thomas says, let's go and die with him, he means Jesus, not Lazarus. He means Jesus, not Lazarus. I think there's a common misreading of this passage. Because they don't even know Lazarus is dead for sure. They haven't traveled there. They haven't seen it. It's not their concern necessarily. They're hiding away, way away from Jerusalem. And why they're hiding is because they don't want to get found by the religious people because they want them dead. Their fear is a fleshly fear. Their fear is that they're going to lose their rabbi, their teacher, their mentor, their friend who they've had this close, intimate relationship with for the past few years. But finally, when the teacher says, let's go, you go. When the teacher says, we're going to walk by light, you go and you walk by light. You don't worry about darkness. And so Thomas, the only disciple mentioned in this passage, and the rest of the disciples presumably go to Bethany. So Jesus doesn't always do what we think he should do. And in that fleshly desire of wanting him to plan out our life the way we want it to be planned out, the type of life where we live and have all of our dreams come true and we have great health and we have great families and great marriages, that's not always the way that he has this plan. And so we see even further in point number 2 that Jesus doesn't always meet our expectations. His ways are not always the way that we think he should do them. So we see in verse 17, he arrives and finds that Lazarus has already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, this is a significant detail that John gives. There was a common belief in the day, in the Jewish belief, that the soul would kind of hover around the body for 3 days, hoping to re-enter it. This, of course, is a false belief. Jesus teaches us that dead, absent with the Father, that the soul departs immediately. But they had this belief. So when John has this detail of that he's there 4 days, he's wanting the readers of the day, and he's wanting us to see that Lazarus isn't just dead, he's dead. Decomposition has already set in. His soul is departed. He is in the tomb, dead. So Bethany, as I said before, is less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. So there's a mass of people there that have come to mourn. There's lots of Jews, Mary and Martha, are all there grieving at the house. Martha hears that Jesus has come and is just outside of town, and she just runs to him. She leaves right away. It says Mary stays at home, but Martha goes. And she comes to Jesus, and right away she says, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. In other words, you didn't meet my expectation. I know what you could do. I know what you could have done, and you didn't. So she comes in this anger, but has this bit of resign. Says, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus says to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answers, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So now when I hear that conversation and I think about what we know of Martha. Now we know Martha, probably the most famous story, it gets brought up often, is the story where Jesus is there with Mary and Martha at the house. And what's Martha doing? She's busy preparing, right? Getting the food ready, getting everything ready. And Mary's sitting at the feet of Jesus. And she calls out to Jesus, why don't you tell Mary to come help? I'm busting my button here. Am I allowed to say that? I'm working hard. Jesus says, no, Mary, I'm only here for a short time. Mary's chosen the wise thing to do. And so I imagine, just thinking of those things and other things we know about Martha, that in her personality, she probably felt here that Jesus was just kind of giving her a platitude when he says, your brother will rise again. It's kind of like when we go to funerals, and sometimes we'll go to somebody who's lost a loved one, and we pat them on their back and say, they've gone to a better place. Right? Here's some free advice. Don't ever say that. It's true. It's 100% true. There is no lie about that. But just from a grief counseling perspective and a relationship and a friendship perspective, probably the better thing to say is, I'm sorry for your loss and I love you. That was for free. No point to my sermon, just for free. But I think this is what the kind of conversation that's going on between at least what Martha thinks is going on. It's like, yeah, I know he'll rise again, but right now you weren't here. He's dead. I want him now. I hurt now. And I just imagine Jesus in this next conversation, which is just this absolutely beautiful conversation. I see him taking Martha, just gently grabbing her shoulders, looking at her in her eyes, and with this just gentle humility, saying, Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. And when he uses that term, I am, it has this connotation of, I am the resurrection and the life, and everything that I am is the resurrection and the life. Everything that's in me, Martha, everything who I am, is able to resurrect and bring to life, Martha. I can imagine him maybe pointing over to the tomb. Said, he who believes in me will live, even if he dies. He who believes in me will live, even if he dies. But you, Martha, you, whoever lives and believes will never die, Martha. Do you believe this? And I just see this great patience and humility as Jesus is bringing Martha deeper and deeper into faith. See, Jesus' question to Martha here has little to do with any kind of faith of Jesus' ability to bring Lazarus up from the grave. Jesus is asking Martha if her faith can embrace a belief in Jesus' lordship over death itself. Martha, can you believe that you will live if you believe? And he's having that conversation with each of us. Do you believe? Do you believe? Do you believe? I am the resurrection and the life. When she confesses in verse 27, yes, Lord, she told him, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world. If you're part of a sermon-based life group, or if you just like to go through the questions in the back of the sermon, you're going to spend some time talking about belief. I want to grab this chair over here. And I want to explain this type of belief. The Greek word here is pistoio. And there's a sense that it's not just belief, but it's also faith. It's also trust. It's kind of an encompassing of all things. In fact, there's this definition of this word that says it's just the all-encompassing of the soul to put absolute faith, trust, and belief completely into something that it takes over your life. So if I have this chair, and I can see that this chair is pretty sturdy, looks like it'll hold me just fine. Now I can look at that chair and walk around it, and I can have belief that that chair will hold me. I can even have faith in that chair. Faith that that chair has the power to hold me. I can trust that that chair can hold me. I could be going on a long journey and just tired and see a chair, a place where I can rest, and I could even bow down and give thanks and worship that chair. Because I know and have faith and believe that it is good. But it's not true belief. It's not true worship until I actually take myself and sit on the chair and give my whole self, my weakness, my tiredness, my shame, and everything to rest on this chair. That's pistoio belief. That's deep, give my entire self and life to Jesus Christ belief. And when I sit here, my worship turns from worship from afar to worship in spirit and in truth. Because I have a deep-seated knowledge that God is good, that he is who he says he is, and that he's done exactly what he would say he would do for me. And through that, I give worship. This is the belief he calls Martha to. This is the belief that Martha confesses. And Martha goes back and she tells Mary that Jesus is here, and Mary just goes running, says the teacher wants to talk to you, and she runs to Jesus. And she says and then the whole crowd follows her. All the mourners, all the people from Jerusalem, so this big crowd heads out towards Jesus is. And she comes and says the exact same thing. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. The same unmet expectation. She has the same response. But what's interesting to me is that Jesus doesn't carry on, though, in the same conversation that he has with Martha. And there was something for me this week that was very significant about that touched me in a deep way, just touched my spirit in a deep way, and that's this. Perhaps Jesus knew that Mary was already there in belief, but Martha, he needed to gently bring along. As I talked about her personality and her differences earlier. And I guess what makes me feel good about this, we often talk about Mary and Martha, and you're such a Martha, and it becomes a derogatory term, right? And there's some people who have a personality that maybe it's a little more bristling, maybe it's a little more stubborn, and you hold back because, I don't know if God can really use me. And then there's some of you who are just absent-minded, and you get voicemails and you forget to respond to them, and emails and you forget to respond to them, and I don't know anybody like this. And you're just kind of a space cadet, and you're like, oh man, I'm failing people. They're mad at me. I can't be used by God. And there's different personality traits of exactly how God made us to be that we say, I don't know if God can really use that, and we feel ashamed. And I feel there's just this beautiful picture that Jesus comes to Martha the way that he needs to come to her to bring her to the faith exactly the way that she needs to. And I think Jesus comes to me exactly the way he needs to come to me. I think Jesus comes to each and every one of us the exact way he needs to come to speak into your life, to bring us into the body of the church, to say that you're useful, to say that God can use every personality type. So we often think that, well, yeah, God can use my sin, even my sin and shame. God can use it anyway. But I've never thought of this fact that God takes our personality exactly how he's made us to be, and he uses that. I don't know, it was an amen for myself this week. So don't let anybody call you a Martha again. Don't let anybody call you something. God has redeemed you. He can use you. He can come to speak to you how you need to be spoken to bring you to belief, because for Jesus, it's always about belief. So now they're all there. Jesus saw Mary weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping. And we see point number 3, that for Jesus, death is personal. You see 3 different statements. First, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And it was almost this sense that he was troubled at the curse of death itself. I don't want people to die. I don't want this to be a reality. I want to give life. So he asked them straight away, where have you laid them? Say, come and see, Lord. And when the next thing it says, he actually wept. He cried in their presence. And then in verse 38, once more, it says he was deeply moved. Jesus felt all of our hurt and our pain. In the midst of our unmet expectations, in the midst of our broken plans, Jesus comes and he weeps with us. He comforts us. He walks alongside of us. But even more than that, we're going to see the absolute triumph in point number 4, that for Jesus, death does not have the final say. Verse 39, he says, take away the stone. But Lord, said Martha, and this is another comfort to me right here, is Martha. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, the one who would most benefit from him coming alive, from seeing some sort of miracle. She says, by this time there's a bad odor, for he's been there for 4 days. He stinks. Why would you want to open the tomb? And I just love this, because even though Martha already confessed this belief, this deep belief, sometimes we just still don't get it. And that's okay. There's sometimes even us on the other side, we have all this at our fingertips. We know the end of the story, and still we don't get it. But Jesus is continually patient, continually pursuing, continually wanting to move Martha, me, you, all of us closer and closer. In verse 40, he talks about belief again. Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. When Jesus looked up to the heavens, to where people would know where God is, and he does this specifically. He's saying, Father, you, God, are my Father. You and I are one. I'm praying to you, and I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I'm saying this right now for the benefit of all the people standing here, that they may believe that you have sent me. Because for Jesus, again, it's always about belief. So he speaks out loud, that they may believe that you, God, have sent me. I'm praying this prayer. And when he said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice. Now I want to give you a context of this loud voice. This word loud is only used 6 times in the New Testament. Once here, twice at Palm Sunday, and 3 times before Jesus is crucified. So the other 5 times that it's used, at Palm Sunday, it's used to describe the loudness of the throngs of people, the large crowd who are shouting, "Hosanna! Hosanna!" And the other time that this word for loud is used is at the crucifixion, when those same people yell in one voice, in this loud voice, "Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him." In that volume. And I'm just trying to get you to imagine that you're there by the tomb, and this tomb is covered, and you're with this group of people and this loud voice, and Jesus stands here and he says, "Lazarus, come out!" And I can only imagine the time stopped. What did he just say? Did he just tell a dead man to come out? Okay, this guy is crazy. This is ridiculous. What do you do with that? You're standing there. What's going to happen? And the very next verse, which has got to be one of my favorite verses, says, "And the dead man came out." Amen. But then what do you do now? All of a sudden, then this word for "came out" is like he was just there. He was present before them, standing. And what do? Do I give him a hug? There are so many ceremonial and cleanness laws about touching a dead person. If I give him a hug, I might have to go into this uncleanliness, like be banished for like 10 years. What do I do? Is it a ghost? How do I rationally explain this, that this man who's been dead for 4 days is now standing in front of me? And if there's any doubt, Jesus says to them, "Take off his grave clothes. Remove that which shows that he was dead, for he is now alive." The stench is gone. And even further, if there's any doubt that maybe all they saw was a ghost or something like this, we can go to chapter 12. Verse 1, it says this, that 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. And here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. And then right after this is the picture of Mary coming and pouring the perfume and wiping Jesus' feet with her hair. The dead man lived. Jesus, who has control over physical healing, who has control over nature, has control over death itself. But what's the point of this? What is important now, and what has been the most important thing all along, is belief. Deep pistoio belief. Belief that the grave is empty and the grave clothes have been removed. The picture of Lazarus in the open tomb and the grave clothes being removed is just a picture of the empty tomb that we're going to see at the glory of Easter. And the grave clothes that have been removed is just a picture of the sin that has been taken off from all of us because of his death. It's screaming for belief. And that's what Jesus is calling for. It's what John has been showing us all along. Jesus bringing his disciples of the day and bringing us, his disciples, here along on this journey to show us that he's revealing himself to us. And he ends with this last miracle of raising the dead because he wants his disciples, them and us, to know that in a few days he's going to do something that will be unforeseen by anyone. So you've enjoyed my time with you. I've been with you, but guess what? There's going to be a time soon where you're going to see me die. I am going to give myself up unto death. And I want you to know, and I want you to see, and I want to make it plain that death has no permanent hold on me. So when you see me die, you're going to see something even more incredible. You're going to see me alive. You're going to see me walking with you. And you're not going to believe it because it's something beyond our realm of belief. It's beyond our realm of our understanding. So he brings them along this path to see it with him physically, to believe. It's not necessarily about Lazarus. It's about belief. Knowing that Jesus Christ, who he says he is, to know the plan that he has, to know that he has power over death, even death itself. And I mentioned earlier that Thomas was the only disciple mentioned in this passage, and that's interesting to me, because what we know about Thomas is he's doubting Thomas, right? He's the one who wouldn't believe, who had a hard time just hearing that Jesus was alive. It wasn't until he could touch and feel. And again, in that same pursuit of Jesus knowing exactly who we are, exactly what we need, no matter our personality, no matter our doubt, no matter if we are the most hard-headed person in the world or the most gullible person in the world, Jesus comes to meet us right where we are, right who we are. And he's bringing Thomas along, saying, Thomas, you're going to see me dead. You're going to see me alive. You're going to have a hard time believing this, Thomas, because I know you. I made you. I know your thoughts. You're going to have a hard time. But Thomas, here we are now. You were present. Lazarus was dead, but he's now alive. I'll be dead, Thomas, but I'm going to come alive, and you're going to see it. You're going to be a part of it. And Thomas, I will live, and the grave clothes of many will be removed. The stench of death and sin will be gone because of this, Thomas. And he brings Thomas, he brings the disciples, he brings us along in this journey. And so I end with just this last question. It's the only question that can be asked at the culmination of this. And it's simply this: do you believe? Do you believe? If you're here today and you've just come to see that Jesus is who he says he is, I wrote a prayer in a card. There's a card like this in your worship, your folder, in your bulletin, your program, your piece of paper that you have in your hands. And it looks like this, and it has a prayer on it. And I just want to lead us all in this prayer. And for those of you who may just come to see Jesus for the first time, to just open your heart and with humility to say this prayer. You can have it up on the screen. We'll say it together. Jesus, I have deep belief that you are the resurrection and the life. I know you came to die on the cross for my sins and rose to life again. This day, I want to unwrap the grave clothes of my life and put my faith in you. I confess I have wanted to do things my way, but now I want to give you my whole life. This is a prayer you've prayed for the first time, and you have this heartfelt belief that this is exactly truth. This is exactly what you want. This is exactly what you want to confess before God and before others. I would just encourage you to just write your name, your email, your phone, whatever's the best way to contact you. I'd love to contact you just to encourage you in this step of faith, to help you understand more about who God is and what it means to be a disciple of his. So I'd encourage you just to quickly fill that out. Just that first box, I prayed this prayer for the first time, but there's a second box that I wrote in there. It says, I want to take a step toward losing some of the grave clothes in my life. So I want to ask you this question too, and I think this question is for really two different groups of people. Perhaps you've been here today, and if you're honest with yourself, you're going to leave with more questions than you have answers. You're not sure who Jesus really is, that something like this could actually happen. And you have questions, but in the depth of your heart, you know that there's something more to life, and you want to know what that is. There's some grave clothes, just some junk that's tightening you up, and you want to live free. If you want to take a step in that direction, even if you don't know who Jesus Christ is, I just pray that you would mark that. And I'd love to contact you. I'd love to talk with you to help answer those questions. Like, I'll bring Pastor Scott along. We'll do lunch. I'll make him pay. I cannot. I'll make it happen. I was like, I don't know if I can make that happen, but I will. Somehow. It'll be miraculous. But then there's another group of people. Perhaps you've been walking with Jesus a long time. You know exactly who Jesus is. You've been that full belief you put in your life with him, but if you really admit it, there's just still some junk that you want to get rid of. There's still some grave clothes that you just are struggling with. It could be your marriage, your family life, something at a job, just a sin you're struggling with. But today you just feel this call from God saying, I want those grave clothes unwrapped. I want to live a life full in Christ. And I'd pray that you'd fill that out and mark that as well. And one of us will contact you. We will gently and humbly contact you with no judgment, only grace. With only a heart to give the life that Jesus has given us to you, just to pass a little bit of it on. But we here as the church, we want to help you move closer to Christ. We don't want you to stay where you are. We want you to come into more fullness of life. So in just a minute, the ushers are going to come and take our offerings and the offerings that we give as a part of our worship. But I'd also pray that you would, if God's calling you to fill out this card and place it in there. And like I said, we'll contact you. I would like to call the ushers forward and let's pray. God, we thank you that you came to give up everything that we might believe, that we might have life. God, I pray that you would just pour your life into this room. That every person who needs just a touch from you would receive it, that you would call each of us to move closer to you. God, I especially pray if there's any people in here with questions about who you are, or making that decision for the first time to say, yes, God, I believe and I trust that you are who you say you are. God, would you walk with them? Would you help them? And most of all, God, we want you to take these offerings that we have to give to you, that you would bless them, that your name would be known, that your life would be evident to all. We thank you for bringing us, your disciples, along this journey to see who you are. In your name we pray.